Hello, Abigail here with the astrology for this week. This week is kind of bottom heavy. We do kind of have an event on Tuesday, but then everything happens Friday and then Sunday. So the beginning of the week might feel a little lighter, which is nice considering that we've kind of just come through the eclipses, which are always a lot and very, very intense. Um, and, you know, a nice little reminder that we are coming to the end of the Mercury retrograde as we move into, next week. Monday, we will get that direct station from Mercury. And then later on the 12th, we're going to get Venus stationing direct. So things are progressing, things are moving. It's starting to feel as though tides are shifting, but not quite yet. I do find that there is a runoff after eclipse season, so usually 2 weeks to the next lunation where things kind of slowly wind up and wrap up. It's going to be extended a little longer because of these retrogrades. So, continue to do what you can when you can. Also, in a lot of my readings, specifically tarot, but also in astrology readings, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of like big positive progression until July. A lot of us are going to be picking up the pieces and figuring things out from how intense and wild the beginning of this year has been. It has just been a lot. That's just how it is. So yeah, give yourself a break, take a deep breath. We went from Mars retrograde to Venus retrograde to Mercury retrograde to eclipse season. It hasn't been easy. So be gentle with yourself, even as we kind of start to feel the energy pick up and it starts to actually feel like spring rather than a constant struggle. But we start off on Tuesday with Venus conjunct the North Node. And this feels really important because Venus will be passing 3 times over the North Node, opposing the South Node. Same with Mercury. So this is kind of the midpoint of this retrograde story with the North Node, with the eclipses. We just had that Aries eclipse, adjacent to the North Node. It was a North Node eclipse. So it's a big moment. Venus is exalted. This can be really positive in kind of making things softer and less aggressive as so very different from Aries, but it can lead to delusions, and the conjunction with the North Node needs us to get real about what we can and will carry into the future with us and what is just no longer functional. And if it's not functional, it doesn't have to go in the garbage, but it needs to be meddled with. It needs to be adjusted. We need to process what our needs are. We need to process our values. And because we have it conjunct the North Node, it's opposing the South Node, we're also dealing with the past. And I would say for some of us, it's not even just this past, it is one of our multitudes of past lives or a multi layer of past life stories that we're having to process and understand through this conjunction. So allow yourself to process. Also, a lot of the North Node activity in Pisces has been wild, crazy dreams. So pay attention to your dreams. Some people have more prophetic dreams, some people don't. A lot of my dreams are just me processing the insanity of the world. Um, so not everyone has direct like prophetic dreams. It's fine if you don't. But if you do, pay extra special attention. I pay attention to the dreams that I remember clearly. That's kind of how I sort through them. And then on Friday, which is action packed, we get Mercury conjunct the North Node. And so this is a continuation of that story from Tuesday. Now that we've kind of sat with our values and faced our fears and dealt with what relationships can move forward with us, what can't, which ones need more work before we move ahead. Now we get to put a voice to it. Now we get to communicate it. Mercury is a detriment, which I don't view them as bad or good, but it does mean that maybe the communication has to come from a different place than just speech or writing or language. Maybe it comes from music. Maybe the processing and communication comes from art or poetry. Maybe instead of speaking something, you need to write it down. Um, Maybe it's a wordless communication. Maybe you just need to take space from communicating. But all of this is about processing and dealing with stuff. And Mercury is the ruler of the South Node that is opposing. So there is this kind of push and pull between Mercury being in a place where it doesn't function the most functionally and the South Node being in a place where function is really important. So things might feel a bit topsy turvy. Don't try to force anything or push anything, but the things that do come to the surface, do take them seriously, do pay attention to them. And then we move to Mars trine Saturn, which is a malefic trine. So on the surface level, yes, this can be having issues with things that involve water. It can be, you know, things kind of going wrong in our lives, things kind of crumbling. But on a deeper level, in the way that I kind of experience and prefer to see this, it's about being able to harness our frustration and anger and upset at how things are not being done the way they should be. And then using Saturn to make real, pivotal, functional change, activating Saturn to help us work through these things and create a sustainable change, not just plowing ahead and cutting through things like Mars would normally do in a different sign, but in a very Cancerian way, in a way that is caring, in a way that values safety and collective care. And then with Pisces, it's that getting under the surface and dealing with stuff that we can't see. So it is a day of great trust, and it's also a day of great trust in self, a day to take what you care about and start to build what you need as a container for it, to take your anger at how the world is and your frustration at injustice and to do something with it. It doesn't mean that you have to go out and join a march. I'm disabled. I would not be much help, and I would also probably be more of a hindrance with my disability to protesters. So I do what I can from home. I sign things, I push things, I donate where I can, when I can, but you need to start investing in the things that you care about. If you truly want a better world, we need to harness the malefics. We need to harness the things that are traditionally considered bad in order to create something beautiful. And what is more demonized than the violence of the working class? Um, yes, I am a socialist. Or anything that values humanity and human rights and everyone's needs being met. And then on that day, we also have something interesting that happens. So we have that Mars trine, and in the middle of that Mars trine sextile, both Mars and both Saturn at 24 degrees, we have Uranus. And Uranus will eventually be moving into Gemini this year. I believe it moves in July. And this is a really beautiful activation of collective and unexpected and timely energy. So, Friday is a really excellent day to resist, to be unique, to push against the waves of conservatism and religious oppression, which is what our country is currently doing. It is religious oppression to force everyone into Christian values. As someone who was raised fundamentalist Christian, it is wrong to force other people to believe what you believe and to punish them and incarcerate them accordingly and enact violence on them. So take hope. Join in the collective struggle. Join in where you can. Not everyone is on the front lines, but everyone needs to put their hand in. Everyone needs to uplift someone. Um, but if you're looking for the right time to really start caring about stuff, it's this week. So engage, activate. We have this beautiful sextile. Saturn, Mars, Uranus are lined up in this beautiful trine. I shouldn't say trine because it's an aspect, but triune, if you will. And while it might be messy and it might be harsh and it might feel aggressive, it is right to stand up and to push against what we've been told is the correct way to get our rights, when the truth is the only way we've ever gotten human rights is through violence. And we will move on. Also on this day, like I said, Friday's action packed. We have the sun sextile Jupiter. Jupiter is still in Gemini. It is still, in its detriment, but that detriment is creative and spontaneous, and we have an exalted sun. So there's also a bit of a kooky energy in this day. It's almost as if that kind of trine that is earth and water is being kind of whipped up and activated by the fire air trine, not air trine, air sextile that the sun and Gemini get to play in. And sextiles are really helpful. They feel quieter, but they are incredibly effective, and a lot of times if you're like, I'm missing something in my chart, there's some sneaky sextile going on. I missed for years and I don't know why. And no other astrologer mentioned it to me until like later, which I thought was interesting. But I have a Mercury Saturn sextile. And I always wonder why I've had trouble getting visibility and being seen and heard. Um, and being believed by the people closest to me. Well, it's a nice representation or not so nice representation of that sextile. It also means that I absolutely 100% believe in everything that I say. And I'm absolutely willing to take responsibility for my faults. So that's a good representation of a sextile. It's not bombastic or flowing like a trine. It's not resistant and traction oriented like a square. It's a nice little conversation. And then on Sunday, we have Venus trine Mars, which means that Venus is coming into its conjunction with Saturn, but that's going to happen next week on Monday. So it's a really interesting thing. We've just, Saturn is still very tight in orb. So that's kind of Saturn Mars trine is still functioning. Also, remember when we have slower moving planets like Mars and Saturn, Mars is a little faster, but it's the slowest of the personal planets. It tends to like percolate, like the exact moment of the astrological minute of that, alignment and trine. It's like impactful, but there is like energy that surrounds it as they come into connection and then go out of connection with each other. So this is continuing, and Venus is getting wrapped up in it. And so this need to really step into our values is here, to really root into what we believe in, to really, Saturn is also a destroyer. So it's also a reminder that Saturn is reworking our values. It's reworking how we fight back. It's reworking our comfort and what we are comfortable with. So let it do that. It will feel crumbly. It will feel like it's falling through our fingers. That's okay. Let it fall. What will remain are the little gems in your hands as the like silt and rocks fall away. Um, but it is a continuation of that North Node conjunction in a way. Now that we know what we need to do, we have to take action and we have to do the thing, and that is the hard part. And it's not easy. And as we move into that Saturn Venus conjunction in next week, we're going to continue to feel that pressure to let things fall apart, to allow things to crumble. And instead of trying to patch them together and keep them in place, we have to let it all go. Like, if it's not going to get fixed, if it's not going to become stable through some effort of our own, then it's time to clear it and go back to the drawing board on it. And that can be really hard, but it is very essential. So, this is a week for hope. It is a week for action. It's also a week to consider those values that you have. We're still in this Venus retrograde. I find obviously there's relational stuff. Obviously, there's, things to do with taste and the things that we find beautiful and things like that. But what I find Venus retrogrades really, really hit home are values. What do you value? How do you honor those values? How do you align those values closer to yourself? Retrogrades are almost always a realignment. It's like when we've forgotten who we are, or we've gotten off track, or we've started to have doubts, or we've lost some faith, or we need to just take a whole new different trip and go somewhere else. The retrograde is here to either put us back on track or to send us off on a different track, which can be disorienting, it can be upsetting, but it is really essential. So I encourage you to participate, to ask yourself what your values are, to ask yourself what you stand for and what you value. Also, I've seen a lot of people saying this in a lot of online spaces, and I completely agree. Some of you are going to be really surprised at how quickly people abandon their communities and families and friends and minority groups in order to kowtow to a cruel and brutal system to save their own hide and also to claw at power. Don't do that. Be a detriment planet. Go against the grain. Harness any Uranian power in your chart and resist the hell out of it. And also have a good time, because If it's going down and they're going to try to take us with it, we might as well go down singing and dancing. And also, that singing and dancing is going to keep us afloat. And I'm not saying ignore the horrors. I'm not saying minimize the struggles in places where they need help. Participate in that, help them. But you also need to enjoy the world we live in. And that joy is going to give you the strength and the energy to fight for it and to bring out the best, not only in yourself, but in others. Um, the world is highly nuanced and beautiful. And I think in recent years, we talk so much about regulation as this fixed point. Regulation is only a fixed point in capitalism. Regulation in the world, regulation in nature, is the ability to process and to cycle and to be able to bounce back. It's the ability to go really, really low and go really, really high, and to be able to navigate the spaces in between, and to just not live in any of those spaces, and to not lose hope in any of those spaces, and to continue to move forward. And that's coming from a body that doesn't regulate all that well sometimes. Anyways, my loves, this week does feel really important and really pivotal. I know everything in 2025 has felt that way, but this is another one. Be vigilant, be activated, and also from a Taurus sun, take naps. When you don't know what to do, rest. And even when you know what to do, rest. We need our rest, we need our sleep. It's a lie that we're told to burn us out, that we have to be on all the time. No, we just have to care, and we just have to show up and do our darndest and not be afraid. Well, you can be afraid, but you need to be brave. Anyways, my love, be brave this week, and I will see you in a different space and time.